Hi everyone, I am going to introduce relative clauses to you. Relative clauses are very common modifiers in English, and the reason we use them is to make it clear when describing a person or a thing. They generally have a function of description and recognition for a person or a thing which can be shown in a sentence. For example, they wanted to thank Native Americans who taught them how to grow food. In this sentence, who taught them how to grow food is a relative clause to modify the noun Native Americans. We call them restrictive relative clauses because they provide the main clause with necessary information about a person or a thing. For example, a person who usually gets up early, the marathon race which I take part in, the longest trip which I have ever taken. Now let's move on to the next part. Where can we use the relative pronoun? A relative pronoun often comes after a noun. For example, they wanted to thank Native Americans who taught them how to grow food. In this sentence, who is a relative pronoun to modify the noun Native Americans. A person who usually gets up early. Who is a relative pronoun to modify the noun person. The marathon race which I take part in. Which is a relative pronoun to modify the noun marathon race. The longest trip which I have ever taken. Which is a relative pronoun to modify the noun trip. Now let's have a look at the function of relative pronouns. The roles of relative pronouns depend on the subject or object in relative clauses. First of all, for subject relatives, we can use who, that, which. For example, Native Americans who taught them how to grow food. A person who usually gets up early. Please note, who is one of the most frequent relative pronouns used in our daily life. Secondly, for object relatives, we can use which, that, whom, whose. For example, the longest trip which I have ever taken. The marathon race which I take part in. The girl whose book I borrowed. Be careful about the relative pronoun whom, as it is seldom used in informal situations. Thirdly, for adverbials of place relatives, we can use where. For example, you can find the pen where you put it. For adverbials of time relatives, we can use when. For example, the trees turn green when spring comes. But in formal English, we use which with a preposition. Where and when are often used in informal English. Finally, I would like to talk about the non-restrictive relative clause. The non-restrictive relative clause offers additional information about the noun. Without this information, people still know what we are talking about. Let's look at the example. The book I bought, which you might have already read, is entitled Pride and Prejudice. If we drop which you might have already read, the sentence, the book I bought is entitled Pride and Prejudice, is still complete. Okay, thank you for watching. See you next time.